I'm from South Bend, Indiana, born and raised. I didn't have a crazy childhood. You know, my mom, she was a good mom. My dad was around most of my life. I was very smart in school. I was very active in school. I played soccer. I did cheerleading throughout high school.
I was the middle child of 3 brothers. My parents were immigrants to this country. My father worked really hard to give us a wonderful, wonderful childhood. We had everything growing up, and I mean everything. The best shoes, the best clothes. We went on a lot of vacations. We lived on the best house on the block, and we were good kids. We had a lot of fun.
I came from a great upbringing, from a farm town, and I'm one of 7 kids, 5 boys, 2 girls. Went to a Christian school for 7 years, had a great upbringing. Played football, basketball, baseball in high school. Was on homecoming court. Had a great time in high school. Lots of friends, great environment, great family home to come home to.
My life started in Royal Oak, Michigan, from a large family. There are 2 half-brothers and sisters and 3 biological sisters. So I've, like I said, grew up in Royal Oak and was raised after first grade in Troy. Went to elementary school at Costello and Larson and then Athens High School. Played sports, basketball, softball, volleyball, you name it, I played it. Enjoyed, very much that scene, the sports scene, and all my friends were involved in sports. All-American girl. I've always had a passion for kids and animals. Kind of the same, one and the same sometimes. But I really enjoy helping students become the best that they can be, whatever that takes, and have a real passion for how they feel deeply for them in their circumstances. So when I became a disciplinarian, I became very creative with how to help them understand that I was fair and on their side. But at the same time, there are consequences, and I find myself in that situation as well. And I think that they know that I cared very much about them.
So I had a great childhood. I grew up in Southwest Detroit. I'm originally from Detroit. I grew up on a block that was ethnically diverse, and I felt very comfortable with that. I was introduced to some things that most people wish they had the opportunity to, and that's learning about different people.
When I was about 13, I had an uncle that molested me. I couldn't process it, and at that age, I didn't understand, it wasn't my fault, I didn't ever tell anybody about that. I just felt like either 1, I was gonna ruin my family, or 2, that nobody would believe me. I started rebelling, I'd run away from home, and I got busted at a party, smoking weed and underage drinking. I kind of started turning to men to kind of validate how I was feeling about myself. And that's really when I started to drink a lot and started hanging out with older people.
At a certain age, I was very intelligent, but I just didn't want to apply myself. I was more into just having fun, and I didn't really care about school when I was young. So at the age of about 16, I decided that I wasn't going to finish high school, and I got sent to an alternative school because I wasn't doing too well in high school. Not because I couldn't, just because I didn't want to apply myself. I was more interested in just having fun. So I went to an alternative school, and I even got kicked out of there.
I had a real nice upbringing from a family. We grew up on a couple 100 acres and baled hay every summer. And my only experience at that point with addiction was through my father, who used alcohol, and he eventually died of cirrhosis of the liver, which is due to alcoholism. And in the back of my mind, I always kind of knew that that was going to happen with him. I saw him drink a fifth a day for years. My folks got divorced when I was 3, and my mother got remarried when I was 5, and that's when we moved out onto the farm.
At 13, my younger brother had a nervous breakdown, and me and my brother were like thick as thieves. You know, we done everything together. We was each other's conscience, and we kept each other in check. You know, if I said I'm gonna do this, he'll say, I don't think you should. You know, and I was grateful for that. So not to have that, I felt lost and alone. Now I'm looking for acceptance, and I think that's where a lot of my drug use was based on acceptance and fear.
Graduated high school and I started to go to IUSB, which is Indiana University of South Bend. I did that for a while until I started partying a little more, and then I ended up getting pregnant at 19. I kind of stopped going to school. I stopped doing the things that I needed to do. When I was pregnant, the kid's father beat me up when I was 6 months pregnant. And I didn't end up pressing charges, but he skipped town and went to Minnesota. He's not involved with my son at all. I don't know, after that, things kind of took a turn for the worse.
I did not want to work 12, 13-hour days. No matter how much money we made, there was no time to enjoy anything. So I got serious about school, and I ended up doing really, really well, graduating with honors. I was a typical college student. I joined a fraternity. I was able to balance my life at the time, work, school, everything. Partying, everything that I wanted to do, I was able to do at the time because drugs weren't a factor yet. I was drinking a little bit more than normal people would, partying a little bit more. My philosophy was like, I work hard, I'm gonna play hard. And I didn't go back until I was 28, so I was a little older getting into college, so I kind of missed the experience, and I wanted to get everything I could out of it, so I did. And then I decided that I was gonna go to dental school.
I was coming home from a house party. I was super drunk. It was probably about 3 a.m, but when I walked around a corner, there were 4 men. 3 of them raped me. The 4th kind of just held me down. And, after that happened, I was scared to tell anybody because, I wasn't supposed to be out drinking at the time. So I went home and I showered and I was all scraped up and bruised up. And then I was like, maybe I should just go to the hospital. Maybe I should report it. So that's what I did. But by then, I had showered. I had kind of washed away all the evidence and they really couldn't find anything. And I still have night terrors to this day of that event. It's just a replay every night. With something like that, I started looking towards men again to find validation. And I got with this guy who was supposed to be in recovery from meth. We had went to one of his friend's house and I had asked for something to drink and they gave me some sweet tea. But they didn't tell me that it was soaked with meth filters, which is how you make it, is the end process. So there's meth residue on the filters. They soak it in the tea. So I drank the tea not knowing. And then once I felt that feeling, they were like, oh yeah, by the way, this was actually meth that you're on. And I had liked it, I was like, well, shoot, let's try the real thing,
Back in 2013, I had an emergency appendectomy. And at that time, the CAT scan revealed a mass on my uterus. And so a month later, they had to take that out. And there was concerns that it was cancerous. And thankfully, it turned out not to be. But obviously, that was a very scary time. And from there, I'm not sure if the surgery created the back issues. I had some, but not to the extent after those surgeries. Went to a pain management clinic, and if you get epidural shots, they give you opiates as well. So I was on large doses of opiates for about a year, and then had back surgery. And then from that point on, I was given 120 pills a month for another year. And those pills, you just had to go pick up your prescription once a month from the office. 120 a month is a lot. And for a year, that's a lot. And so trying to get off of those on your own I could not do that on my own.
After college, I got a great job with a financial services firm. won all kinds of trips down to Cancun and the Caribbean. I had a great house on a Pine Knob golf course, and I started just accumulating things in life. You know, I had a nice vehicle, I had a hot tub that overlooked the golf course, I had a Harley, my brother parked his Harley in there, season tickets to Michigan, 30-yard line, row 1, and life was great. I can't put my finger on why I started using. I picked up at the age of 32 and started taking prescription painkillers for no reason. My neighbor had them, my friends had them, my other neighbor had them, and it was just, they were everywhere. So I took a few, made me feel good. It bothers me that I just did something that gave me some instant gratification.
It started out with drinking, and then it went to smoking weed, and from smoking weed, it just opened the door to any and everything. And I was one of those type of person, like, I'll try it. And I had nice times. You know, it started out nice, you know, laughing and joking and going places, and I felt more, less inhibited, and I was more open. I could talk, and, you know, things just seemed to be a lot smoother when I was high. But then I was introduced to cocaine. And cocaine was like the wonder drug for me. It gave me an opportunity to have energy, and it seemed like things were just more vivid, and I met a different group of people, and from that point it just spiraled out of control. A young lady introduced me to crack cocaine, and wow. It's hard to explain. The addiction is so quick. You know, you try it and you like the feeling, and you get pulled into it, and it doesn't last very long, so you have to continually do it. And like I said, after a while, I was using it on a regular basis. And then next thing I know, there goes the job, there goes the apartment, and things just started to crumble from that point on.
I had a friend who was like a brother to me. His name was Billy, and he was using heroin, and I didn't know. I tried to help him, but I realized at a certain point that I couldn't help him because he didn't want to get help. What are you doing? That's ridiculous. You're gonna ruin your life. He went to jail for a year, so he was clean for a year. He got out, I had him come stay at my house with me. He was with me for about a week, was doing really good, and then he asked me to use $100. I gave it to him, and the next morning he was dead. So I took that really hard. It really, really destroyed me. For a long time I felt very guilty, like it was my fault. I could have not, if I didn't give it to him, it wouldn't have happened. There was a lot of guilt behind it. And this might sound like a ridiculous reason, but the reason that I touched heroin was because I just wanted to see what was so good about this drug that this guy who had everything going for him would take his life. What was so good about this drug? I couldn't understand it, so I had to see for myself.
I started using meth every day. And I'd get it by any way, like we'd scrap metal, or any way I could like come up with the means, I would do it. We were staying at the house where people were making meth. And CPS had showed up because the guy I was with had a child removed from him through CPS. And they had told me, like, if you don't leave with your son, we're gonna have to remove him from you. So I did that. I left and I signed a paper saying I wouldn't have contact and I wouldn't have my son over there. Later that night, after CPS had showed up, the house had got raided by the feds for somebody that had a warrant there. And so they immediately came to my mom's house and removed my child from me. And, you know, I was super bitter about it because, you know, I had followed their rules. Like, I didn't have contact with that person. I wasn't at the house when the house was raided. But they still felt that they needed to intervene, which, you know, looking back, like, as mad as I was about it, like, today, like, I'm grateful for that because I don't know exactly where I would be. So I gave up guardianship to my mom, thank God, that she was willing to take him and able to take him. He was about 2 years old at that point. So my mom officially had guardianship, and I was trying to do the right thing. I just could never stay on track.
I started to realize there was a problem probably throughout the pain management clinic when I knew that the pills were getting shorter and shorter. So it was harder and harder to make the script out for that whole month. I was using more and more and more, and, you know, I denied that it was really an issue, but I knew in my heart that it was becoming something I couldn't control. I had tried to withdraw by myself on several occasions and successfully for about a week, and then it just became, you get phantom pain. It became, you know, like you had the flu, throwing up, you know, just very ill. And so you go back to using again to avoid those withdrawal symptoms.
I can imagine that those close to me at the time would say, this did not happen to Patrick. This is not something, Patrick doesn't get addicted to heroin. He was the rising star at work, good individual, the last person you would expect this to happen to, living a life of a complete lie.
I always felt like an outsider. I always felt that I didn't measure up. It gave me a reason to use drugs, you know, because how I felt. I think I was dealing with depression too at the time. It just spiraled out of control. Then after a while, I couldn't stop. Friends and family were telling me, you know, you got a problem. I was like, no, I don't have a problem. You guys got a problem. You know, yeah, I might have drank a little too much, or I might have smoked weed, or used cocaine too much, but I didn't really have a problem. I wasn't addicted. I had great potential to do things, and instead of acting on those and going forward with that, I got more into drugs. And the more I got into it and the more I used, the worse it got. I'd get clean, and then I would go back. And once you start using it and you get some clean time, you really feel ashamed, and you really feel like you gave something up, and that makes it even worse. So how you feel about yourself declines even more.
I absolutely loved it. I'm not gonna lie, I loved it. It was great in the beginning. It was so wonderful for me, man. It took me to a different world, and there was a sort of escapism that I've never experienced. All your troubles just seem to kind of go away. You have nothing to worry about. And that lasted for about a month. And then after that, it seemed like I couldn't function unless I had this drug. So I was waking up sick. And I didn't understand what was going on. I didn't even know how addiction worked or what was going on. All I knew is that when I took this drug, I felt normal.
Using every day. If, you know, I would steal from stores to trade for the dope. It was just a miserable life, you know, never knowing whether I was going to have a place to sleep or not, or if the police were going to catch us.
It doesn't care. You know, it has you to a point where you don't care about anything but getting more.
I was just taking so many pain medicines that, you know, my head wanted to explode. And eventually that's how I got to heroin. It was cheaper and more powerful. And that was my gateway to it. For my family and those who knew me. Patrick is addicted to heroin? Are you kidding me? That word is just, growing up, that was the worst word you could use.
So those first several times you take something like heroin, you feel amazing, you feel euphoric, you feel like you're floating on air. It's a synthetic version of some things that happen naturally. Maybe you've heard of like the runner's high. People that run a lot sometimes experience what they call the runner's high. When the body naturally releases endorphins, those are positive feeling hormones and neurotransmitters, it can produce that same effect of euphoria. Runners to describe, feeling like their feet aren't hitting the ground, like they're floating, and it can happen for upwards of a couple of minutes, but it's the body's natural ability to produce those endorphins and flood the brain with those feel-good hormones. So that's what happens when you take heroin the first couple of times, that those neurotransmitters are released and it produces those feelings of euphoria in the short term. So the first several times or the first several exposures, it feels really good. It feels really positive. So that's what's happening in the brain. That's what's happening in the body.
Substance use disorders, and particularly opiate addiction, are real chemical, neurobiological diseases. We call them chronic relapsing brain diseases. And once a person's addicted, it's no longer a choice whether to use their drugs or not.
What happens with, I'll go back to the heroin example, is you experience euphoria the first several times. What happens over time is that euphoria, let's say you're at 100, 0 to 100, 100 being the most euphoric. Each time you take that, that comes down a little more and a little more and a little more. Where eventually the body is also building up what we call a tolerance to that substance. So to get back to that level, you have to take more of the drug or more of the medication or more of the prescription.
I had moved to Lansing, and I was doing well in Lansing, and then I wind up using again. I relapsed, and this time I had a child. My daughter's mother, she had our daughter, then she went back to using. Because a friend had called me and told me that, she was in a dope house using and left our child somewhere. And I had to rescue my daughter, so I went to court and fought for her, and I got custody. And I was doing very well. Had a nice job and was maintaining and doing things, and people were proud of me because here I am, a single parent, and I'm doing it. But then again, never raised a child, never had a child, and I was working a lot of hours to try to maintain things with her and keep her in child care, and it just got overwhelming. And I went back to what I know, to medicate myself, and it spiraled out of control again, and then I lost my child to the system.
I ended up moving to Rochester, Indiana with my stepsister. I was living upstairs with my boyfriend at the time, and we were making meth. The Indiana State Police had been investigating us for 3 months, and I remember the day that they actually raided us, and I was sick and tired of the life. I just got into a huge fight with my boyfriend, and I walked into the bathroom and I was telling my sister, I'm leaving. I'm just gonna go. And as I was walking out the bathroom, I remember the police kicking in the front door. And in that moment, I don't know, I kind of felt a sense of relief. I was so relieved. I was so tired of living the way I was living. So when they kicked in the door, I'm sure they looked at me like I was crazy because I was smiling. It was just, I was so relieved. For the first time, I wasn't I'm not getting arrested. I'm getting rescued at this point. If something didn't happen, I was going to die.
The problem was I became a different person. People would start calling me and I wouldn't answer. That wasn't normal. I stopped showing up to classes. But this heroin had a grip on me like nothing else. I had a fiance at the time, a beautiful fiance who loved me dearly. She had no idea the whole year and a half that I was using that I ever touched it. That's how good of a liar I became and a deceitful person.
Sold my couch to pay for prescription pain medicine. After I went from your traditional Vicodin or Norcos, which is your generic low-level pain medicine, I went on to use Oxycontin, more powerful, morphine, and then a little blue pill called a Roxy, R-O-X-Y. Boy, that was the devil, and that was a fateful decision. That's essentially synthetic heroin. They give it to cancer patients, and I came across a means that I could get almost an unlimited access, and those were real powerful and something I couldn't turn back the clock once I took those.
So my addiction was an isolating addiction where I just wanted to be alone with the drug. And so after a long day, I mean, there were times I just couldn't wait until 3:30 or 4 o'clock to come, where I would go home and that's when I would use. And on the weekends as well. But I did not use at school or around kids. You know, I did have some boundaries and guidelines to that. And who knows when that would have stopped, but at this time I did not use in front of those students. I do suffer from depression and anxiety, so I was given, you know, benzos as well. Benzodiazepines are like Xanax, Klonopin, those type of things. So when you add those to Tramadol or Vicodin or any of those other drugs, it obviously increases the effects. And so I would say at my highest, I was probably taking 10 Vicodin on a day. That would be probably the most that I was getting to at the end there.
Now I became a selfish person also, and that was never me. At a certain point, I came to realize this is me now. And that broke my heart. My fiance, she thought I was cheating on her. And I was. I was cheating on her with heroin. But it didn't stop me from using, I'll tell you that. I saw my family devastated. I saw my finances dwindling. I went through $180,000 in a little over a year. I had a $300 a day habit, sometimes more.
My head would get to the point where it wanted to explode. I felt like I could take a needle and pop it. It became so swollen with medications. And eventually my business went under and everything I had was gone. I got to the point where I didn't care. I was very aware in my addiction and very conscious of what I was doing. But when I had the opiates inside my body, I just didn't care. Opiates are meant for pain. And what they did to me was not only take my physical pain away, they took my emotional pain away. So I didn't cry anymore. Something happened, it didn't tear me apart. I would just take more pain medicine. And when I would cry is when I wouldn't have it and all those feelings and emotions would come back.
You know, I ran into an old drug dealer I owed money to, and he told me, hey, if you don't give me that money, you know, something's gonna happen to you, or we can find a way to work it off. You can work for me for a period of time, and you can make that money back, and everything will be fine. Putting a drug addict around drugs and having him sell drugs is like telling a monkey to sell bananas. You know, he's gonna eat them. And that's exactly what happened. I started using again. I left my daughter with a neighbor for a week. For a whole week, nobody knew where I was. You know, I thought something happened, and they went into my apartment and found out I wasn't there. And I finally came home, and there was a warrant on my coffee table. And after about 4 hours, the police came to my door and arrested me. And talking about a hurtful feeling, knowing that, you know, here it is. I've given up something that was very precious to me, but that goes to show you how powerful an addiction is.
An assistant principal in Troy has been arrested for a home invasion.
Take a look here. This is Amy Buchanan. She was arrested on Friday. It happened Friday afternoon. That's when she was arrested for allegedly breaking into a student's home. The homeowner reported $40 was taken. Coco McAvoy is live tonight. And Coco, any idea, do we know why this woman was breaking and entering?
Good evening. Police say Amy Buchanan broke into the house looking for prescription drugs. She's now facing a felony charge, and parents are shocked. This is not the Amy Buchanan parents know. Buchanan was the assistant principal at Smith Middle School in Troy for nearly a decade.
To me, she was just always that person that would stick her neck out, always for the students, always.
Police say a homeowner on Booth Street caught Buchanan on surveillance video, looking through drawers and allegedly stealing $40.
There's got to be more to the story. We know her, and she's in our community, and for when something like this happens, it's disruptive.
What's more concerning for parents is that police say Buchanan was looking for prescription pills in the home.
I'm sad by the fact that she had to resort to petty theft for this huge epidemic of prescription drug addiction that's going on in our country.
Buchanan is now on administrative leave.
It makes me really sad because she is a good person and she did a really good job at that school.
Buchanan was officially charged with second-degree home invasion this morning, just days before the new school year starts.
For some reason that day, when the young man that I had driven to his aunt's, he said, my aunt never locks the door. And it triggered in my head, okay, I can drop him off at his grandma's, go back to the home, and figure out if she has any in the home. And so that's what I did. I look back on that day and I still can't even look at the news or whatever is out there on me. It's very difficult to watch. I don't even know who that person is. I was about to get in the shower and an officer came and knocked on the door. And I looked at the door and I thought, I wonder what they're here for. Didn't even cross my mind that they were there for me. And again, that speaks to the chaos of what addiction does to your life. Like, I never even crossed my mind. That's not normal. And so I answered the door, invited them in, and at this time now there's two officers. And before the night was over, the sergeant was there too. I knew all of the officers and the sergeant. It was a very difficult moment because I work with them and I'm not typically on this end of it. Well, never have been on this end of it. I think they pretty much knew this was going to be a big deal.
She's accused of breaking into a home to find drugs, and she happens to be an assistant principal of a middle school.
This is Smith Middle School assistant principal Amy Buchanan in her official staff photo, and this is a mugshot just released by Troy Police.
Being my position, and it was going to hit the media, and it was going to be a pretty big deal. So they came in, we talked. I admitted that I was looking for prescription drugs to the police. Despite what happened, I consider myself an honest person, and I did just say, listen, this is what I was looking for, this is what I did. And that time they arrested me, took me to jail, and I spent the night in jail. And it's a felony, so nobody could bail you out. So I didn't call my parents. I did call my cousin to, just kind of help me through the night. You can, despite what they say, I could call more than once and call throughout the night. And she picked me up in the morning, went to my parents and told them the news.
I ended up having to do 6 months in Indiana prisons. And I thought I was gonna get out and I thought I was gonna do great. Like that's how I felt. I thought like prison was it. Like this was gonna be it. Like there's so many times where I was like, this is it. Like this is my bottom. My family was there for me in prison. So when I got out of prison, I moved to my mom's with my son. And I was still talking to the guy I was with when I was using heroin. And when we lived in Chicago, like I was still talking to him. He was supposed to be going to rehab. And so when I got out, I knew he was still messing up. So I didn't talk to him for like 2 weeks. Like he didn't even know if I was out. Well, I get a call saying that he's in rehab. And I was like, okay, maybe we can work things out, maybe we can both just stay clean and do good. And so we started this program and we were doing great. And, we were both like 6 months in. He asked me to get married. And I was like, yeah, of course, we were doing good. And right before we got married, we started using methadone and Suboxone. He had health issues, so he used that as his excuse. And then I started having health issues, so I used that as mine. Things were going really good. He was back in his kid's life. I was back in mine. And then we decided to take a trip to Chicago to see his kids. We were doing the right thing, and we got sidetracked again. He eventually stopped going to work. You know, I would work and I would spend all the money that I made that day on heroin. And I decided to go to rehab. I think this is for the third time. So I go to rehab. You know, he's out on a run, doing his thing, still using. And then he calls me and tells me, you know, I'm checking into the psych ward. And he was there for 3 days. So I go see him after he gets out. You know, like, he's clean, I'm clean, thinking like, okay, let's try this again one more time, just one more time. And we started using again. I stopped talking to my kid. I stopped going home. I stopped seeing him. Call every now and then. But I was so wrapped in stealing from stores to get the next one that I didn't think about him. I tried not to think about him. So I just kept using and we kept using. And it got to the point where we didn't have anywhere to live. We didn't have anywhere to stay. Slept on the streets a few times, carried around backpacks, carried around a big comforter so that we could lay it on the ground when we wanted to sleep. And we ended up finding a truck that a friend would let us stay in for a while. So we slept in the bed of this truck. We had totes full of clothes that we stole. You know, we'd go steal stuff for ourselves and then eventually not wear it and sell it for dope. We'd fight all the time. We fought all the time. You know, I would try to leave. I'd say I'm leaving him, and he'd make a huge scene in the middle of the street. You know, downtown South Bend, like, you leave me, we're both going to jail right now. You got needles on you, we're both going to jail right now. So we would box in the middle of the street. Like, things just got super bad. And it was my son's birthday. I'd stolen a bunch of stuff from the store. My mom was finally like, you know, come give him his stuff. She didn't want to take it because she knew it was stolen. But like, this was, like, I knew that this was my opening to try to get back in with my family. And you know, I cried to my mom that day and it was just like, I don't know how to get out of this. You know, and I'd always use the excuse, and they were like, you're here now, just leave him. And I always use the excuse, but all my stuff, he's got all my stuff and I'll have nothing. You know, so I'd always end up going back pretty much just because I wanted to get high one more time.
They say insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. And that was what I was doing. I was doing the same thing over and over, thinking this is going to be different this time. I had an overdose. About 3 weeks later, I had my second overdose. I was alone at home. Nobody was there. I was out for 12 hours until time number 2, God sends me somebody. My brother comes over. He never came over just because. He's knocking on the door. He ended up having to break a window and come in. And he found me on the floor. I was laying on my arm for the 12 hours on my right arm and cut the circulation off. And that's how I lost my arm. I need to say this part too. I never ever used a needle. People might look at this and say, he had a needle in his arm, so he must have had something happen. That's not how it happened. It's very important that people understand that this can happen no matter how you're using. I wake up in the hospital now because they couldn't revive me when they got to my house. And finally they get me to come back to life. I'm laying in the hospital bed. I remember looking up and feeling like I was in a terrible nightmare. Now there's police standing over me again. Doctors, my brothers, my mom. I'm like, what are these people doing here? I had no idea where I was or what was going on. And in the background, this doctor saying, sir, we have to amputate your arm. And it sounded like a Charlie Brown movie, like wah, wah. I'm dead serious. It was like, I felt like I was in a terrible nightmare. We need you to sign these papers. The longer you take, the shorter that your arm is gonna be. And I'm just coming to. And I see my brother's crying, so now I know that this is serious. I've never seen my brother cry in my life. I look down at my arm and it's all blue and puffy. I couldn't move it. It felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. And this is a real decision that I have to make. And I don't want to do it. I come from a wonderful family. I had everything, every opportunity, more than most. And now they're going to take my arm? They didn't take it, I took it. It took 2 days for me to make that decision, and it was the hardest decision I've ever made in my life because I didn't want to do it, and I made every doctor in the hospital come and tell me that was the only way, because there had to be another way, but there wasn't. So they amputated my arm. I was in the hospital for about 2 months after that.
The amount of time I spent trying to hide my addiction was overwhelming. You couldn't fathom the amount of energy and hours I put into hiding my addiction. But eventually I got caught. Came to the point where I finally admitted that I was an addict. And then, I got sick of fighting it. I got sick of fighting the addiction and fighting with my fiance at the time. I can remember I just walked out of the house and never came back. Done. I'm just going to move into somebody's house that I barely knew, but I knew that he used heroin and so did I, and I slept on his couch for 3 months. While I was there, I became very, very depressed and just in a very dark place. And it wasn't long after that New Year's where I had said I'm going to check myself into rehab and try to get myself better. I called my fiance at the time, my folks knew, my family knew, and unfortunately that was an expectation that those close to an addict have. He's checking himself into rehab. He's going to go there for a couple weeks and he's going to come back and he's going to be better. I went to rehab with those expectations and wanting it, but when I got out, I went back to the house and my habits didn't change. Nothing changed, and it wasn't long, it was a few short weeks before I had relapsed and started using again. I couldn't stand to watch the sun come up in the morning. Every morning I would look out the window and that sun would come up, I would put the covers over my head and say, I have to do this all over again. I have to wake up and I have to lie about where I'm going. I have to lie about why I need money. I have to lie about how long I've been there. I have to hide my addiction. I have to hide my relapse. And I couldn't escape my addiction. I wanted to, but I couldn't. And so I found a way out. That was to kill myself. I thought life had gotten this life was. I didn't want it anymore. Went and bought enough to kill about 10 people at one time. I parked myself in a McDonald's parking lot in downtown Flint. Hid the car on the corner and tried to overdose intentionally. And every time I would try, I would fall asleep right before I would overdose. I wake up 6 to 8 hours later, and I'm not dead. I can't believe I'm not dead. So I would do the process again, put the opiates in. I wanted to die, and I couldn't. I would wake up again 6 to 8 hours later. This process repeated itself for 2 days. Just continued to try to overdose. and before I would overdose, I'd fall asleep. But I was taking enough, plenty, but I couldn't die. And so eventually, there was a hospital half a mile down the road, and I got my way there and checked myself into a psych ward for a week. Somebody there had I was telling them the story about what I just did. And it says, boy, if that's not God ever saving your life, I don't know what is. I got out of the hospital and believe I checked myself into a 3-quarter house in downtown Flint. Wasn't long before I was kicked out of there. Checked myself into a shelter that I used to, Carriage Town, a homeless shelter that I used to volunteer at when I was a kid. And got kicked out of there. Went to a treatment center, got kicked out of there. It was frustrating because I wanted recovery and I couldn't get it. And I was a man of great successes. I could accomplish a lot, and I had a lot of achievements. Great athlete to now being homeless and living in abandoned houses. Called my brother, tell him that just come get me, please. I have nowhere to go, nowhere to turn. And he called my mother, who came and got me. And I detoxed myself. I had already done the gauntlet of treatment centers, and I tried another one. And when I got out of there, I moved back in with my folks. And so the first time I tried that, I got close with my family again. They had a lot of confidence in me being able to recover. And 3 months went by, and then I relapsed. I was a respected son, a respected employee, respected person in the community, and I became an embarrassment to everybody.
I definitely think about where I would be today if I didn't get caught. I needed to get caught because I wouldn't have changed. I don't think. I was entrenched in my school, loved what I did, loved my friends, loved the kids, everything about it. And I would not have left that to get help. There's no way. Once you run out of the prescription or friends or however you got the drug, then you do move to heroin. And I've heard a lot of stories about where that can go. And I have no doubts that that would eventually turn into that, particularly because I couldn't stop on my own.
When I was young, you could experiment with your buddy and a 6-pack of Strohs, and you weren't necessarily going to turn into a raging alcoholic. You may have your college experience and then mature and become extremely productive. There's no such thing when it comes to these opiates like that. You don't have an option of experimenting and, I'll sample in this while I'm young and then maybe I'll just grow out of that. It's not the case. When you sample with this stuff, you're going to get addicted. And when you get addicted, your life is going to change. It's going to change forever, and it's not going to be for the positive. It's a life-altering decision you made. You didn't see people dying on a regular basis on crack cocaine. They caused a lot of problems for us. A lot of violence, a lot of robberies and assaults and crime, but they weren't dying. We're burying people all the time now. If I ever would have thought, even in 2005 when I left narcotics as in charge of narcotics lieutenant, that our deputy sheriffs would be carrying Narcan along with EMS and fire, and we'd be administering it daily, trying to save people, I never would have thought we'd see that. If somebody would have told me, in 2005 we're going to have a heroin epidemic, I just didn't see this coming. So I think people got to keep in mind that everybody and anybody could get hooked on this, and it may very well kill you. A lot of people say, these opiates don't affect me. I'm not on drugs, my children aren't on drugs, why does it affect me? It affects everybody, and it affects you in a number of ways. Number one, you're one long-term renewable prescription from being an addict if you get prescribed and overprescribed and get on this stuff. So it can happen to you, just like I see it happen to everybody. I see it happen to the 40-year-old tradesman that blew his back out. I see it to the 30-year-old housewife that had a C-section. I see it to the 20-year-old college football player blew his knee out. It goes all across demographics. Number one, it happens to anybody and everybody. But number two, you think about our crime rates. I've got 500 inmates in the jail. Almost every single person in this jail is here for a substance abuse problem. We've got a few gamblers here and there and different things, domestic violence and what have you, but almost everybody is narcotic related. Now, it may say home invasion, break and entering, this sort of thing, but it's not. You peel back the layers, they're heroin addicts or they're meth addicts, and they're breaking into your house to steal your guns, to steal your electronics, to pawn those for their narcotics. So when you think of crime, you think about your house being broken into, it affects you. And those are drug addicts that are doing that. They're not thieves, they're drug addicts fighting an addiction. The third thing is pick up the paper, look at the obituaries, and look at all of these people that died suddenly, unexpectedly in their home, and you see a 25-year-old or a 30-year-old, and it doesn't say, there's no disclaimer after a valiant battle with cancer, died unexpectedly. Good many of those are overdoses, and I defy just about anybody to say they don't know somebody who had a friend or a child or a cousin or a neighbor or a classmate that has already perished in this epidemic, because I see it all the time, and I've been to many funerals of people I know, their children and their spouses and what have you that have passed away. So it affects all of us.
In terms of genetics that control addiction with substance abuse, we know from the science that it's about 50%. So that means there's a 50% chance you could become addicted, but it's not guaranteed. It also depends on environmental factors. Do you expose yourself to a substance? What's your stress level look like? What is your age? Was there exposure to substance abuse in your family's history or in your family's past that makes that more likely? Even if that's the case, again, it's still about 50%, meaning it depends on many, many, many environmental factors.
My name is Emily Van Blerkum, and I have been in recovery for a little over a year now. So I moved to Michigan and went to Sacred Heart and got out of rehab. And then I moved to my sister's, who has been like a huge support system for me. Without her, like I don't know really where I would be at this point. And like things quickly took off from there. Like life just became good. I got a job right away, and I've been working for a little over a year there. I've been promoted since I've been there, and life has just got really good for me. I've got to like build this super cool relationship with my family again, like for so long that I didn't have, and it's so exciting to like have that again. I think like that the best things about recovery for me have been the fact that like I have this amazing relationship with my son again, and like I get him on breaks, and like the reunification process is going, you know, it's starting, and like that's the greatest part. I never thought that I was gonna be a mom again. I never thought that like I would have that bond with him again. And like I never thought, like I always thought like I wasn't gonna be good enough as a mom and like all these things. And like today, like I have this self-worth that like is so undescribable. Because for so long I thought I was just like this hopeless, lost addict. And I don't feel that way today. You know, a huge part of my story is the relationships that I've always been in. And like today, I can like be alone and not feel lonely. you know, and it's such a change from where I was. I don't need anybody to validate who I am today. And like, that's so amazing to me. 'Cause I always did, I always have. And you know, I always talked about all these bad things that has happened to me, and like how like I let that control my life. And like today for me, like that's another great thing about my recovery is like I don't have to let those things take a hold of me, because like for so long they did. They ran my life, you know, from the molestation to the rape and the abuse. Like those things controlled who I was and how I felt about myself. Recovery has gained me some serenity and acceptance over those things, and like forgiveness of those things. And I don't know, it makes me want to cry a lot. And like for so long I cried painful tears, and like I don't have to do that today.
My name is Ziad Elisel, and I've been clean for over a year. So after I got out of the hospital and I lost my arm, I continued to use, and I was in a pretty dark place, and I found myself one day asking God why he did this to me, why he would allow this to happen to me. And one day when I was saying that prayer and asking him to forgive me and to help me out, I realized that I already got my blessing. My blessing is that I'm still alive. Once God came to me, I decided that I am alive, and I have a lot of friends who are dead today because of this disease. And so I decided that the fact that I'm alive means that I'm supposed to be doing something bigger than trying to become a dentist and chasing this material world. So I decided that I was going to get into recovery and I was going to make a difference. So I came out to Port Huron and I got into recovery, and I started volunteering with Bridge Builders, and I started working with teens, and I realized I could make a difference, a big impact in teens' lives. I mean, think about it. If somebody would have came and talked to me at an early young age, I might not have been in the position that I was in. So I started an organization called Difference Makers, and what we do is mentoring and substance abuse prevention for teens, because the earlier you can get to somebody, the better. I met through Bridge Builders a gentleman named John Romine, and he's kind of my hero today because he became my newest mentor in life. And he heard my story and he's been following me, and he asked me one day, he said, Z, what do you really want to do? You have an organization that works with teens, but what would you really, really love to do? I looked at him and I said, John, you're going to think I'm crazy, but I would love to start a recovery high school. And he said, what is that? So he looked into it and he came back to me and he said, you know what, Z? I have this crazy John Romine idea. And from there, he said, we could start this recovery high school at Intervention Academy. It would be a school within a school. And so the idea is that the students who are in the school are all willing participants in recovery. So they'll get their high school education, but they'll receive wraparound recovery services from Difference Makers. So from there, the idea was born, and we will be opening at the end of April a recovery high school in Port Huron. So I'm really excited about this because it'll be the first one in Michigan. So it's kind of a big deal. Today I am blessed. Today I'm courageous. Today I'm here for a bigger reason than myself.
My name is Patrick Patterson, and I've been clean for 2 years. I truly feel from the bottom of my heart, God saved my life to make a difference in the lives of others by helping those that are suffering from addiction and connecting them into recovery. I came out here without a driver's license, without a car, and without knowing a soul. I got a pedal bike, and I got a job at the local Meyer gas station and rode my bike 4 miles every day to work and back, and started the process of rebuilding my life. It wasn't easy at first. I started to catch cases. The destruction of my past all started to resurface again. and things were tough. But as time went on, my confidence got back again. That was the biggest key for me. The continued support of my family undoubtedly just was instrumental in my recovery journey. Gaining confidence, building that outer shell that I needed again to be the old version of Pat Patterson. I was a strong community member, and I knew that I could do that again. As time went on, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, before I knew it, I had 6 months. And it was around that 6-month time period where I started to say, I can do this again. BW Rock was formed at the same time I was filling out an application to get my master's degree. I thought I could use Blue Water Recovery and Outreach Center as a launch pad to make a difference in the community. Being that I had gone through the treatment centers and saw firsthand some of the gaps that there are, and how can I help fill them, and where was my life before I wrecked my life. I had a good job, and I was stable, and I was a good father, and I was a good individual. And if I could have only imagined if somebody showed up at the doorstep as a local recovery group, what may have happened. Would I have had the same tragedy that occurred? I don't know the answer to that, but my mission today is to go out and find those individuals that are suffering from addiction and get them into recovery in the workplace before the destruction occurs. Today, my daughter's in my life. She's so beautiful. It's such a pleasure to have her around me and to be around each other. My family's in my life again. They respect me again, and it's a beautiful thing. This whole journey has been so incredible. I wake up every day with an incredible amount of joy and energy that surpasses the love that I had prior to my addiction.
My name is Eric Webster, and I've been clean for 8 years. I was at my lowest point, and everything just seemed hopeless. Today, things have changed around 360 degrees. I'm currently working in a career that I'm enjoying. I work for Blue Water Area Transit, and I just started a job there, so I'm happy and pleased with that. I've been able to give back to the community. I volunteered in the jail for the last 6 years to those who were suffering like I was. So it's a good feeling to be able to give back and have someone come up to me and say thank you very much. Because there was a time when people didn't say thank you. People didn't even want to be around me. So now it's definitely changed. I connected again with my family, my brother and my daughter. Those things are working out well for me. I'm well respected in the community instead of looking at being looked at in a different light. And it's a good feeling to be in long-term recovery. It's absolutely, like I said, it's a blessing. I'm grateful through the programs I went through that helped me out in those situations. And it's just, life is beautiful. God has given me an opportunity to have life and have it in abundance today. My daughter is 17, and she's will be attending school here in Port Huron. She's trying to get into the Culinary Arts Institute. Grateful that things have changed for me, and I say the same for my brother. He's very happy and very glad that my life has changed, and I'm so grateful that he's in my life, him and my daughter, and the rest of my friends and family and cousin. But I owe the gratitude to my brother for doing for my daughter what I couldn't do at that time. He's my hero, really. Today I'm grateful. I'm very grateful to the program of Narcotics Anonymous. I'm grateful to the fact that God has given me an opportunity to have life and have it more abundantly. Life is a journey. You know, every day I wake up, I'm blessed. I truly am. You know, I've lived on both sides of the fence, and it's a lot much easier on this side of the fence, and I'm loving it. I love myself today.
My name is Amy Buchanan, and I have been clean for almost 7 months. Well, the court system I've now been in for 7 months as well, and I'm still waiting to be sentenced and to figure out what the charge is going to be. So it's been delayed again. During that time, you know, your life is on hold, but also there's some good things with that. It proves your sobriety for a longer period of time. It also kind of gets you on your feet a little bit more. There's accountability during that time. So right now I'm working to, you know, get back into the to a career of some sort. Got some different avenues that I'm looking at. Some in the recovery world, some a business of my own. I'm not sure quite yet where it's going to lead, but I'm working hard on those things. And also, just there are tough days. I'm not going to lie about that. But for the most part, the better days are more than the worst days. I'm speaking out wherever and whenever I can with FAN, Jody Switowski's opioid conference, several open talks with NAAA meetings. Basically, anyone asks, I speak out to share my story so that hopefully I can help someone else that is struggling and not have to go through what I'm going through. I absolutely love still working at the kennel. I spend probably 50 hours there, working 18,000 steps average a day. Puppies, can't go wrong working with animals every day. So my lowest point was probably the Saturday after the incident where the media took hold of the story, and it was blasted over all of the media, all our local channels. And so that was my lowest moment, which also became my highest moment, where people reached out to me, hundreds.
She credits support of family, friends, and colleagues, the gallery full of them during her last court appearance.
Email, text, phone calls showing their support for me, and made me realize that that one incident didn't have to define me. And at the same time, people were forgiving me well before I had forgiven myself. And they were there to support me and remembered who I really was. The 24 years that I've put in to the district, and my reputation preceded me. So it was the lowest moment, and at the same time, the highest moment.
Addictions affect all walks of life. People from low socioeconomic status to very highly educated, wealthy people. Once an addiction occurs, it changes a person's behavior and their perceptions. So all this is complicated and obviously cannot get done by any one person, one group, or an agency. So join the fight today and get involved. If you don't know where to start, check out our website at sechealth.co.
Hi, I'm Sue Rakowski, co-producer of My Secret is My Story. It's been a privilege to work with the 5 people in recovery featured in this documentary. However, when we first started, there were 6 people. Tony No was a person who struggled with addiction for a long, long time and sadly passed away from his battle February 13th, 2019. I'd like each of us to take a minute to think about people like Tony and maybe people in our own lives who are struggling with addiction. Rest in peace, Tony.